Hi everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and today on Wandering DMs, we're going to be talking about the second edition of the award-winning Fiasco storytelling RPG, which took it from an indie game to a fancy box set with no dice. So we're going to be talking about how does that work as a model for evolving other games and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Awesome. So this, I'm going to take the reins here. It's a little unusual, Dan. I think you usually give us a lot more intro.
What?
I'm going to take the reins here because this was kind of my idea that I pitched to you.
How dare you, sir?
Yeah. So just so folks know, I mean, Fiasco is a game that's been around for a long time. It's a story-based, it's a storytelling game. It's intended to be kind of run in one-shots with no GM. And frankly, the reason it's really landed well for me, I really enjoy playing it. It fits a nice niche. One thing I've noticed about it is I have a friend who runs Fiasco all the time at game conventions when I go to like live in-person conventions. And it's her favorite game. She runs it all the time. And the one thing I'll say is, universally, you always can tell in a big convention room full of tables of games which one's playing Fiasco because they are loud, right? It is, there is a lot of laughter, a lot of big, exciting, dramatic moments. It is definitely a hard-hitting game, I would say, in terms of like humor and just fun of engaging everybody at the table and getting them really having a good time. So definitely recommend it. It's a great game.
That's great. I when I was reminding myself what Fiasco was about, I came across a review in Wired magazine at one point, which was very, very positive. But it said if you want very traditional RPG mechanics, Fiasco is going to be a poor fit. And of course, which sounds like that's speaking to me, because I am a fan of traditional RPG mechanics. But we played it live on air actually, and there's a link in the YouTube description here to our season 2, episode 50. It was our last episode of season 2 actually, and folks can see us playing it. I had a blast personally. I think maybe I have a pretty flexible appetite for games, particularly for one shots. Right. I think I can deal with almost any. I can enjoy almost anything when it's on a one shot basis. And I personally, even though I'm not a big storytelling game proselytizer, I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it fits a really nice niche. I ended up playing it just last Friday night with a small group. A group that was actually, we were intending to do a session 0 of a new campaign we were going to get rolling. And some folks couldn't make it. And we were like, should we still get together? It's a smaller group. And we thought, well, let's just get together just to have some fun. And we ended up playing Fiasco. So I think that's sort of what keyed me into the idea of doing it for this show. So let's just review a little bit more of the history of Fiasco. So I have here the original book. The original is a stretch here because when I look at the flyleaf, it tells me that it is copyright 2009, and this copy that I'm holding in my hands is 9th printing October 2014. So clearly a game that did pretty well if it made 9 printings over the course of 5 years.
Nice.
And yeah. So it was a solid book, good, kind of little trade size book, about 130 pages. I would say there's some very nice, pleasant formatting in here, but reasonably dense text. There you go.
Which I like.
And a lot of it is taken up with these big tables. A lot of big tables in there, which is a core part of the mechanic of the game. Maybe should I go over the mechanics, Dan?
Remind us what the theme is. Maybe I'm a little hazy on what the theme is again.
It's really interesting. Thematically, Fiasco sets out... I'll just read the back of the book here for you. It says, Fiasco is a game inspired by films like Blood Simple, Fargo, and A Simple Plan. During a session, you and your friends will engineer and play out a stupid, disastrous situations that exist at the darkly comic intersection of greed, fear, and lust. It's like making your own Coen Brothers movie in about the same amount of time it'd take to watch one. So there you go.
Great.
So it was kind of like this. Yeah.
Coincidentally, just last week, it's funny. It's funny they mentioned Fargo and other Coen Brothers movies because just last week I watched Burn After Reading, which is another Coen Brothers Heist Gone Wrong, starring Frances McDormand, which I enjoyed quite a bit. So I'm down with that.
Excellent. Yeah. Its tagline here in the back of the book is a game of powerful ambition and poor impulse control, which I think is a great line. The interesting thing about Fiasco is even though that theme seems very specific, the settings can really vary. Like you can play those themes in, modern day espionage setting, or slice of life suburbia, or high fantasy, with dwarves and elves and wizards. Like you can still do that, right? It's just thematically. I was talking to somebody about the themes of the game, and we were looking at. So one of the things it does is it presents sort of these core mechanics, and then it offers what it calls playsets. And playsets are sort of like the scenario, if you will. But again, it's a game largely of improv, so you make up a lot. But the playsets offer sort of a setting and a kicking off point, and then a bunch of tables that are thematically appropriate to that setting. And one of the ones I have is that high fantasy, like almost D&D sounding kind of setting.
Okay.
And somebody said to me, it's kind of like role-playing The Hobbit after they kill Smaug. Right, so that, that moment when it all falls to pieces. They've killed Smaug, it all starts to fall to pieces, they're bickering, and a big war is coming. Yep, that's about right.
I can see that. I mean, it also feels very. I mean, honestly, I actually hadn't thought about playing it in a fantasy medieval setting, but it feels very Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, which to me is the most classic D&D of all.
It would work really well for Fafhrd and Grey Mouser.
Right.
It would work well for a Fafhrd and Grey Mouser story if at the end your expectation was that Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser end up either dead or in jail. Because it generally, Fiasco games end poorly for the main characters. Generally.
Yeah, got it. I mean, they're usually broke. They're usually at least broke, if not lost limbs, at the end of one of their standard stories. And probably everyone they know is dead too. Now that I think about it.
Yeah. So mechanically, the way the game is a lot of just setting up scenes and storytelling and play acting and role playing and whatnot, and very few mechanics, very little dice rolling. But there is a big pool of dice that is used collectively by the table to introduce random elements to the game, and they come off of these big tables, and they have things like locations and objects and needs that you kind of feed into the game in the initial setup, and then halfway through the game, they have a thing called the tilt, where you introduce some more random elements. So you get a little randomness injected into your game. And then there's a kind of a denouement section at the end, which also has a little more randomness rolled in. So the new version came out last May, and it is this box set.
Before we get to the new, let me ask one thing. The various scenarios, were they wrapped into that one book, or were they all separate products?
So the book
settings.
Yeah. So that's a great question. The book has 4 playsets in it.
Got it.
And that, like I said, this is 130 pages, and we get into the playsets around page 60. So it's about 60 pages of rules, followed by another 70 pages of just the playsets.
Interesting. Cool.
And then what happened is, I think they made a second book, a companion book that had more playsets and more thoughts and blah 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 about the game. And then a lot of people made playsets. So because it's an indie game, right? It was kind of comes from a very indie place. A lot of people just kind of made their own playsets and then would publish them as PDF, usually free, right? They would just stick them up on the internet. So if you search just do a Google search for Fiasco RPG playsets, you'll find a lot. There are a lot of them. In fact, I don't think I've ever played one of the ones straight out of the book, now that I say that out loud. I think I've only ever played playsets that I've downloaded off the internet. I think the one that you and I recorded was like a band one, like right? We were in a
Fiasco rock band.
A modern, a modern rock band. There's another playset that I've yet to play that I'm dying to play, which is Warhammer. It's just Warhammer Fantasy, which is a perfect setting, I think, for Fiasco.
I think when we live played it, I think you pitched us like 3 different options for settings, and I think I jumped at the Rock Band one. I was like, that's the one.
Good one. So here's the new box set. This came out last May. It was done on Kickstarter. And then in the Kickstarter video, they mentioned it being like, oh wait, I'm sorry, I'm not holding it in front. There we go. They mentioned it being the 10-year anniversary. So 10 years later, they're refining the game and making a new version and blah blah blah. But if you watch the Kickstarter video, they definitely talk a lot about how they really want the Kickstarter to go wide, which of course anyone running a Kickstarter wants their Kickstarter to go wide. But how that they've really made an effort to make this approachable. And that they want you to tell not just your RPG friends, but your family members and anybody who likes board games. They were clearly trying to kind of mainstreamify this game.
One thing I noticed there is like there was a moment where I looked at the box and I'm like, it doesn't say role-playing game anywhere on it. Like previously, it was clearly marketed as your role-playing, and this doesn't have role-playing on the box, to my understanding.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the cover of the box just says a game about powerful ambition and poor impulse control. If I read the text on the back here, it says Fiasco is an award-winning storytelling game inspired by cinematic tales of small-time keepers gone disastrously wrong. So it's a storytelling game, but the role-playing game, the word role-playing game does not appear here. They also tell me it's going to take 2 hours, which, frankly, most board games, let's be honest, most board games way underestimate the amount of time on the back of the box. But I would say 3 hours is a reasonable amount of time to play this game in.
And we played it in 2, right? Is that what we did before?
Did we? Did we make it done in 2? Interesting.
I don't know. Someone look up the duration of season 2, episode 50.
That's fantastic. So here's what you get in this box set. You get the rule booklet, which is this tiny 24-page booklet, which has got a lot of space devoted to art, and the red boxes are generally things like, like you remember in the old D&D books of like, scripty, here's an example of play. So not, like definitely very, very streamlined, feels very board game-ish. I've seen board gamers with longer rules than that. This cute, tiny little board, which is just a place to put some of the cards.
Oh, weird.
Yep. You've got these are your little, like, summary of the rules card to put in front of players so they remember how the hell to do it. And then some decks of cards. Now it didn't come with all of these. It comes with the engine deck, which you have to use in every game. And then it comes with a separate deck for each playset. And the box, I think, came with 2 playsets. And then they sell as expansions sets of 2 additional playsets. So you can see I bought. Actually, it must have come with 3 playsets because there's an odd number in here.
Interesting.
Yeah, it came with 3 playsets, and then I bought a couple expansions. Including, here you go.
Was the box
one of the playsets?
Is the box mostly empty? Oh, great! Oh, now I want to play that.
I mean, that's it, right? These are decks of cards. I've just kind of loaded in here on the side. Come out deck card, right? It's just like a pretty much poker-sized deck of cards. And that's all
it's funny because for some reason that's really jamming my memory of like an Atari console system with cartridge-based stuff that I had to stack up in a. It looks just like that.
I always think it looks kind of like, remember when you had a lot of audio cassettes and you bought the little like briefcasey thing to put your audio cassettes in to shove into your car? That's what
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Do you remember that? Then you're old like me.
Do you still have that?
Talking about? No, do not have that. Now you asked.
Anyway, but Vacuous is helpfully reminding us what our duration was. So when we played Fiasco, Vacuous is reminding us that we got it in at 2 hours and 12 minutes.
There you go. So conceivably playable in 2 hours. That's great.
Thank you for that reminder.
Maybe we were intentionally trying to make it a 2 hour game, possibly. Anyway, ad. Right, every board game comes with a color ad in it, right? But the ad specifically is for the online Roll20 version, and which you asked me, does Is there an online
Yes.
version?
Yes.
There is totally an
Yes.
online version via Roll20.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So it simulates all the cards that they have now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, if you go onto Roll20 and you look it up, not only do they sell the base set, they then also sell expansion playsets individually. Okay. So it's just a virtual version of buying exactly what I've got here next to me in physical space.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yep. Here's the back of this ad is trying to sell me on some of the additional playsets. The expansion playsets come in packs of 2. You get 2 extra playsets.
Okay. Interesting. So does that box initially come mostly empty as a storage place for expansions later, or
yeah?
Got it. Okay.
I don't know if that's the intention. That's certainly what I did with it.
Yeah.
Probably the intention. The decks of cards sure do fit in there nice and neat.
Cool. We like clever packaging and storage options.
Yeah. So. Right, so the interesting thing is here, basically, what they've done is they've taken a game that included dice and a lot of tables, and they boiled that down into cards. And that seems like an obvious optimization to me, right? Like, yes, when you want a selection of a random element from a list of possible choices, your options are roll dice on a table or select a card from a deck. It really does help streamline the game, though, frankly, I find. It does speed up that initial setup component. It's something I really enjoy. I mean, there are, I guess, folks who know the stuff that I make are not going to be surprised here. My game, Fearful Ends, also includes cards. Is also about a game about failure. So there's definitely some some corollaries here. But so the interesting thing is, you deal out these cards. So rather usually in the beginning of a Fiasco game using the old book version, what you do is you roll this big pool of dice and you kind of pass the table around, and each person would say, okay, I want this element from this table, and they would consume one of the dice. And the interesting thing is what that did is it kind of reduced your number of options, because maybe there's a cool thing at number 4 on this table, but like we're out of 4s on the table, so on the physical table, so you can't do that one anymore. With the card version, you just deal out the whole deck of cards, and everybody's sitting there with a handful of cards in their hand, and those are their options. And the nice thing is, it's in their face, and they have time to like kind of parse it and look at it. They have less options, frankly, than they would have had if they had been past a whole giant table. Right? There's less.
Yeah.
Maybe less options. I think there is ultimately less total options, but also their view of the number of options is very limited, right? So that they're not overwhelmed by choice. Right? If it comes around your turn and you have to play a relationship card and you've only got 3 or 4 in your hand, well, there you go.
Interesting.
As opposed to listening to this giant table. So that is the trade-off they're making, right? Like, so on one hand, it's speeding things up. It's making it easier for new people to parse and get into. On the other hand, you're reducing the complexity, I guess. You're reducing the number of choices and how much, stuff exists. Not by a lot.
I mean, we keep keep coming back to a theme of, more restrictions actually squeezes out more creativity in much of the time. And, a lot of famous artists will say the same thing, that they want the restrictions that force them, that box them into moves that they wouldn't have made otherwise. Avoiding the analysis paralysis. And I'm always thinking about the new player experience myself. So I respect that a lot, of being able to focus people on what their options are with them. That seems like a good move to me, honestly.
And this seems like a classic game design trade-off, right? Like, when you want to appeal to your existing audience, you increase complexity to give them more options and more things they can do. And when you want to broaden your audience to a larger group, you reduce complexity so that it becomes more approachable to new people.
Yep. It's true. So sometimes, as like the referee or the game expert, you can I think it's easy to lose that perspective, because I've certainly had conversations with people in the past of, like, let's take let's take third edition D&D for an example, and people say, "Oh, I can make a third edition character in 5 minutes," and I'm like, I have had new players take 2 hours or a week, right? That is not you are overlooking all the assumptions that you've got in the back of your head about things that you're not really doing. And I really like. I mean, you were talking to me right before the show. Actually, I really like always having a couple new players in the game, actually, to touch base on how it's working for them and to see it through fresh eyes. So I think that's really an important thing to touch base on it every now and then.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. Now we can dig more into specifically Fiasco and what they've changed here, but I thought it was also interesting to kind of draw parallels here to like that process of taking a game that is very niche and adapting it for a broader audience. Because let's face it, that happened to D&D in between, say, 1978 and 1981, right? And you see the same things, right? You see it going into a box. You see the rules being simplified. You see it being released in a broader, more accessible way. Which I think is fascinating. That's my intro to D&D story, is that my dad bought my mom one of the box sets because she likes this dragon and wizard stuff. He had no idea what the heck he was buying.
Yep. I see that. And it's interesting that, like to me, I feel that in D&D's evolution, as we're going to talk about that, the interesting thing was in its hobbyist indie DIY state, there were lots and lots of references to stuff outside itself. So the original D&D books they're directly talking about Tolkien. They're explicitly talking about it in multiple cases, and Conan and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and what other books and games you should get. You should get Outdoor Survival, of course, that we're all a big fan of. In fact, you have to get it. And maybe Fight in the Skies, the World War I biplane game is getting used, and a whole bunch of other stuff is possibly getting used outside it. And then as the thing evolves from referencing all these other cultural elements, it's just talking about itself, and all those outside references kind of get snipped off. The thing I can see here for Fiasco is that in the book form, it's assuming you've got dice, right? It's assuming you're a gamer. It's assuming you've got a collection of dice already. You go get that and use that with this game. And as this evolves, it's kind of wrapping the thing up into its own product, where we're supplying everything that you need for the game.
Yep. I mean, the interesting thing is, as you were saying that, what struck me is not only the dice, but the references to external pop culture. Right? If I look at the back of my book here, the first line is Fiasco is a game inspired by films like Blood Simple, Fargo, and A Simple Plan. And those titles of films are bold right on the back of the box. If I look, at the back of the book, if I look at the box, the new box version, Fiasco is an award-winning storytelling game inspired by cinematic tales of small-time capers gone disastrously wrong. It doesn't give names of specific movies. Those are not here.
Yep. Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting how that moved, and I mean, many of us have had to deal with that, right? So many fantasy role-playing game systems, and I'm talking, possibly decades ago, started out as Dungeons and Dragons house rules, and then that's really how they were used initially, and then as they became a full-blown product, they had to remove all those connections. You've had to do that you've had to do that with at least one adventure which was fantastic, one of my favorite experiences of all time, that specifically referenced a particular property, right? And then if you think about making that available to more than just like me and our close circle of friends, you have to think about shaving off all the serial numbers and all that stuff, which on the one hand kind of slightly hurts a little bit, but if you're going to get it to a wider audience, I guess you need to do that.
I agree. Yeah, and it's funny when you get into that realm of homage or parody in this case, where you're like, well, it's funny because I'm referencing this specific thing that we all remember, but like maybe if I'm going to sell this product, I shouldn't really mention it by name. One of the Fiasco play sets I have here, this one is called The Hasty and the Hateful. And it's specifically about people who are like to do illegal car races. right? So,
great.
so
Okay,
they soup up their cars, and they're right. So it's the hasty and the hateful. It's definitely not the Fast and the Furious. It's the hasty and the hateful.
Yeah. Right. So I'm told that our friends Max and Lauren are huge fans of things like the Fast and the Furious, actually. So perhaps that's the next version of Fiasco we should play. I rarely get together with Max if for some reason he isn't talking about one of the Fast and Furious movies. Honestly, I don't know if that's ever happened to you, Paul.
Actually, it hasn't. I've not heard a lot of Fast and Furious forever, but maybe they just go over my head because I don't really know the Fast and the Furious. I don't know.
I feel like they're always trying to persuade somebody to start watching the Fast and the Furious series, of which there's like 25 films now.
Yeah. I wonder if we did play that game with them, would we get the jokes? Like, I don't. They would probably be making references left, right, and center, and I'd be like, yes.
I probably wouldn't. Yeah. I don't know. So now it's interesting that with D&D, if we think about that evolution, because in some ways it went in the opposite direction, actually, because of course the very first version of D&D was in a box set with dice, and that evolved later to become The
white box didn't have dice, did it? Did the white box have dice?
Pretty sure it did. I'm pretty sure it did.
Did it really?
I'm pretty sure it did. Didn't it?
Okay. I have no idea.
Did it?
My white box certainly didn't come with dice in it, but it was bought off eBay.
Of course, you get it secondhand, right? I assume. So, viewers, help us out. Did the original D&D white box come with dice initially?
I thought that was something that set apart. I mean, certainly we know the story of how the first basic set, like, they ran out of dice and they had to do these cardboard chits that you were told to put in a cup. Yeah,
that's how I played D&D for a year.
I've bought secondhand basic sets that still have the original dice in there and the crayon. That's a thing. I didn't realize that OD&D actually had dice in it. That is fascinating. Was it a full set?
Maybe I'm wrong.
Or was it just a 20 and a 6?
I could just be wrong. So Permanent Camper in the chat is casting the vote of he thought it wasn't until the Dr. Holmes basic set. So I could be misremembering my history. Of course, again, I didn't get that box set until very, very late. I went 30 years of playing D&D without having that. So my point is, D&D started in a box and then evolved to hardcover books and made the first ever role-playing hardcover books, partly to get into bookstores. And then, as Paul was saying earlier, that advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Then J. Eric Holmes made the first ever D&D basic set that switched back to a box with dice. We all agree that had dice with an introductory module to get that into gaming stores and something you might buy for kids for their birthday or Christmas or something like that. And here is Fiasco making the same move from book version to boxed form. And maybe that's something that maybe a larger audience recognizes as this is what a game looks like, maybe.
I mean, there is definitely some effort going on here in Fiasco box set to look and feel like a board game. It has a board for crying out loud, which, frankly, is a little silly, right? This board just has places to put 3 face-down decks of cards. And the Let's Not card, by the way, that's an interesting addition. The Let's Not card, it comes with 2 Let's Not cards, which is the X card.
Got it.
The X card that they
formalized.
Okay. And then just some text on the side that is helpful. I mean, frankly, I think it's probably the exact same text that's on the little player help card.
More or less. Okay, I like them renaming the X card Let's Not. I am a little bit hesitant about the X card technology, and again, I feel that it's and part of my criticism is it feels very cryptic, right? It's got these encoded code words that doesn't really mean anything unless you're already an expert gamer, and you have to learn this. It's kind of like being in a a cult with its own, term, its own vocabulary that you need to learn. Let's not. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious what that means, right? That feels not intimidating. It's like, I get it. Let's not do that.
Yeah. It is a good rebranding. Let's not. I would steal this card out of this box set and use it instead of the X card. Let's not.
I think I agree with that. I think I like that move a lot, actually.
It's good. Yeah.
Also, they made it yellow, like a soccer yellow card, like I'm familiar with getting a lot.
That's funny. Well, admittedly, there's positive and negative results, right? In Fiasco, there's light and dark colored dice. You're supposed to have two different colors of dice, and one is positive and one is negative. And when somebody's scene ends, you're supposed to give them a die based on whether the scene went positively or negatively for that character. Those have been replaced with positive and negative cards. Which, interestingly, why is the positive card blue instead of green? Not sure, but they're clearly they've run out of colors, so that's why I think you get the yellow. Let's not.
Cool. Cool. So the hard question that I was going to ask, right, is we like dice. I'm comfortable with dice. It seems elegant. It seems efficient. They're small. They get what you need to be done. They're what I'm comfortable with, obviously. Some people, like I always used to. At one point, I thought that I had a lot of dice. I have a separate complete set for every color in the rainbow, so I can hand them out to players or use them for a bunch of different monsters or whatever, which I used to think was a lot of dice. And in the modern era, I find that I'm kind of a piker on that. There are people that are collecting dice, selling dice, are much more enthusiastic about dice ownership itself and have much larger collections than I have. So dice are great. So my hard question is getting rid of the dice really helping the game, or is it a money grab? Is it a money grab that now you need these custom decks that can't be used for anything except Fiasco, and we have a product that we can sell more physical decks and we can sell more add-ons on Roll20? Is it really helping the game?
I wouldn't call it a money grab. So the decks of cards for this scenario for the playsets, to me, are more of the analog of your D&D modules, right? They are the content that you are playing the game with. So, like, I feel like other RPGs already have this in as much as they sell modules. That's what the decks are to me. And I think that it is streamlining play and making it more approachable to new people because it's removing a layer of abstraction. I don't have to look at a die and note the number and then cross-reference that with a table, maybe which I don't even have. I have to, hey, can you pass me the tables? Let me look, right? Like, it's removing a lot of that and just being like, there's text on a card in my hand, done. So it definitely streamlines play. And what does it lose? It loses a couple of things. There is a tactile enjoyment from rolling dice, right? Like, that's, especially when the game involves, there's a big pool of dice. Basically, you have four D6s per player, and the first thing you do in the game is you roll them all. Like, so that's, that's satisfying. Over the course of the game, you're collecting dice, you're being assigned positive and negative dice, and there's a point at the end where you have to roll them, right? So there's a kind of a gambler feeling in that moment, which is lost in the card version. I would also say another interesting thing that the new version loses, which again, I don't think these are huge strikes against it. I'm not going to not play the new version because of this stuff. In fact, I probably am going to play the new version because it's easier to explain to new people. If people have never played at the table, great, let's play with the cards because that's going to be easier. But something that is lost ultimately is a bit of the groupthink. I think that, like, the first thing you have to do when you play Fiasco is you go around the table several times, introducing random elements into the game to kind of kick off the game. We're adding relationships, we're adding locations, we're adding objects, we're adding needs, and the way I've seen it played, the way I enjoy it most is the way our friend Petra runs it. Is she puts out big butcher paper on the table and a bunch of Sharpies. And as things get added to the game, you literally just write on the table, this thing is now in the game. And that's really satisfying. That's very gratifying, I think, to just draw on the table. But anyway, my point being that like there's a whole bunch of dice, and one of the things you're going to notice like, ooh, not a lot of twos, right? Or oh, we've got like a whole pile of fives and only 2 4s, right? So it's something like that. Yeah. So you start to realize immediately what's scarce and what's abundant, and then you're passing the tables around, so everybody's kind of looking at them, and so there's some amount of chatter and cross conversations and groupthink going on there of like, ooh, this sounds, oh, I'd like this, or maybe this will go into the game, and that's gone when it's just. Okay, it's your turn. Play a relationship card. I can't see what cards are in your hands. It's up to you to introduce.
Got it. Let me just throw up a comment from Permanent Camper, who is kind of agreeing with, it's not all entirely upside. So Permanent Camper is saying a good point about the need for the custom cards. Same problem I had with the Marvel Superheroes card game. Great idea and a good mechanic, but relying on that specific deck, and if you lose some card too, then that's bad.
Yeah.
And like me, I never actually played that Marvel Superheroes card-based game. I always played, the earlier Face Rip that was dice and table-based.
Right.
Seems to be your basic two options.
And let's the other interesting thing, right, is that this. It's brilliant, I think, to sell the game this way, right? Because from a game developer perspective, now I can just produce new decks of cards. Expansions are incredibly easy to come by. This is how we distribute, right? This is how we add on and sell to our existing market. It's great. On the other hand, if you go back and look at its birth in kind of the indie game dev scene, a lot of people were producing these playsets for free, right? There was a lot more creativity in the broader... community of people who liked Fiasco, and if I wanted to sit down and play a Fiasco game, the first thing I was going to do is go to a website and look at this giant list of playsets and see which one grabbed my interest. Right now, I'm reduced to like the 7 decks of cards I own.
Yeah. That is one of the things about dice is that it does open up the hobbyist You can create your own table very easily, right? Manufacturing a deck of cards or a spinner or some other kind of product like that's more difficult. But if you're using dice, then it's really easy. You just make up a Word document with a new table. That kind of opens up that hobbyist aspect.
Awesome. Let me talk about this a little bit because I'm going to dig a little bit more deeply into it. I'm just grabbing a random playset here out of my this is the what is this? In the Weeds. This is about being in a restaurant. So we have like relationship cards that are like friends, breakfast shift server buddies, and an object which is chef's personal knife set. Okay. There's also in here, find them. Some blank ones. So they give you, hey, you can write in, go get your Sharpie, drop in, customize this a little bit. Not a lot. There's one blank one per guard type in here. Blank cards. The other thing I'll add is, so every playset usually has that, 4 blank cards in it. There's also, I've seen online, you can buy a deck of entirely blank cards.
Oh, okay.
Right, so they're clearly trying to leave that door open for the people who want to hack together their own playset. Now they're going to sell you the deck of blank cards.
Okay. Now that at first blush that seems odd, but I have had a bunch of other games. I have had a bunch of other games like the Dungeon board game, right? Or other things that like use chits, where I've wanted to add something, right? I've got a new idea for a new token or a new card. I wanted to add it, but if I hand make it, it's going to stick out in the deck, right? It's going to be really obvious that this is Dan's handmade version. It doesn't look like the other things on the other side, and I would actually totally want a thing that on the face down side looks like the rest of it, so you can't detect that. That I totally see that actually.
Let me ask you though, what do you think about? So given that the playset deck is a separate deck, it's got its own back. I got another kind of fun thing to tell you about that. But anyway, so it's a separate deck, separate from the main engine deck, and it gets shuffled and dealt out. So what do you think about the idea of having a playset deck that is entirely blanks and selling that? Because at that point, that might be the weakest option. So if you're gonna fold stuff into the relationships or the objects or something.
That might, admittedly, that might be possibly the weakest option. Can you see? Do you think that's a good idea?
I mean, I think it's clever, and there's some, like, I like the idea of being able to build my own playset, but at some point, I'm gonna, if I really want to do that a lot, at some point I'm gonna be like, can I just get index cards? Like, why do I need your special blank cards?
Yeah.
Don't. Right.
Agreed. If you're doing a 100% overhaul, then obviously you don't need it. My use case that I've been frustrated with in the past, if I want to add a couple things into an existing deck of something, yeah, I see that.
So here's I'm just going to show again. Here's some of the cards from a playset, right? And then you're going to sit there with this hand of cards. I got a bunch of objects and locations and relationships. The other clever thing that they do is on the backs of all the cards are names. Oh. Usually, I think no, it's the same. So some of them are clearly first names. I got Charlie here, Omer. Uh-huh. Some of them are last names. Here's Smith. And the idea being that when you need to name your character or a random NPC who shows up in the middle of the game, you got a stack of names right here next to you because you have all these cards you didn't play.
Neat. Right? I'm realizing something for the first time. So here's something that
I'm Kim Smith. There you go. Go on. Sorry.
So I'm realizing something that I wouldn't have been able to observe when we actually played it, and that's how closely related this is to traditions from improvisational comedy, improv theater. And it was a number of weeks back that we interviewed Karen Twelves about her book Improv for Gamers, and I'm personally still digesting and using some of that stuff myself. You get to the end of that book, right? You get to the end of Improv for Gamers, and the very last exercises, now you can do a whole scene. You can do a whole montage scene with the troupe that you've developed through this. And remember, basically, as you step into the scene, 4 things. You want 4 things in good improv theater. Number 1, interesting dynamic characters, right? And you just pointed us to the names that make a character specific when you need to. Number 2, deep, meaningful relationships. Right, things that connect the characters to other characters, and that's one of the main decks there. 3, concrete, visceral object work. Right, so one of the things you practice frequently in improv is like, let's work on our fake, 3D objects, and here's how I carry a phone, and here's how I would speak into a speaker on a ship, or kind of things like that. Right, and number 4, edit on good beats. I think it's the 4 things that Improv for Gamers actually concludes with, and those are the 4 pillars that Fiasco's built on. Basically, I wouldn't have realized that a couple of years back, but that's exactly where that stuff comes from.
That is fascinating. I would be very curious. I would love to talk to Jason Morningstar and ask, like, how much improv training did you do before developing Fiasco? Because you're right, it is kind of improv comedy, the role-playing game.
Yeah, and of course, Jason is one of the many contributors to Improv for Gamers, actually. So, Karen, Karen got at least a little bit of input from him on her book.
Fascinating.
There you go. Yeah, cool. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit. So in our last 15 minutes or so, let's talk about things that maybe we could use this evolution in our D&D games. And among the things that Paul pointed out, he tends to Paul likes cards, so he's a good customer for this. And your Fearful Ends game that you're working on is started with mental trauma mechanics that could be added onto other role playing games that you turned into cards. I myself have a D&D product called Book of Spells, which basically has the original D&D magic user spells tightened up, shortened, made into a product that you don't need the entire original D&D box set for. I can just hand it out to players. And I like my little book a lot. Wizards are supposed to be leafing through paper books. So I like players, wizard players at my table leafing through books in an echo of what their characters are doing. Now, Paul took Book of Spells and turned it into cards, turned it into a card deck, which I thought was truthfully I thought was a massive violation. And I was like, how dare you take my idea and turn it to cards? We'll get some, we'll hand it out to players, but obviously they're going to prefer the book. and I was wildly wrong. And every time we've ever given players at our tables the option, they always much prefer the cards. They love it, and it reduces what they're looking at. And when they cast a spell on another character, they can just hand the card to the fighter character that just got buffed, so they know what's happening. And the cards were greatly favored compared to the original book version. So what other things could we do with classic D&D to get away from tables that would streamline the game more?
I have several ideas here, Dan. Things that I've actually tried and used in games.
Okay.
I have, when I was running a lot of basic D&D, there was a time when I would print out potential hirelings on cards, and basically I would have a deck of hirelings, and when the players went to town and said, we want to hire, we want to see who's available, I would maybe roll a die to say, like, a d6 to see how many were available and draw that many cards. Here are the hirelings who are available. And they'd be fully statted out with equipment, spells chosen, and names, alignments, right? And then I could just immediately start role-playing them and saying, like, okay, well, here's the people who are hanging out at the bar. And I'd start talking about them, and I wouldn't, tell them, that there's, a fine Thurgist is willing to join your party for 3 shares,
or a fine robber. A fine robber is willing to join your party for 2 shares.
One of the fun things is then I could even get vague about the class. Frankly, I would say, like, well, there's a guy in leather armor with a longsword at his side. He wants to join your group. Is he a thief? Is he a fighter? I don't know. He's a guy in leather armor with a longsword. But that was super helpful, and especially like for names. Like, I love the use of names in Fiasco on the backs. Just why not? You got a deck of cards, might as well put some names on the backs. So being able to have names, NPCs with names. I think you've done this too, haven't you? Have you printed hireling cards?
I did, and I was burning through them so fast that I actually did revert to paper tables because I found it easier to spit out an addition, one more letter-sized page rather than go through the process of formatting them and cutting them up or stuff like that. So I've gone back and forth on that one a little bit.
But that is. I would assume you could do this with a 5th edition character if you're very careful, but it certainly works very well for old school D&D because they're so small they easily fit on something that's index card sized.
Yeah. Let me throw up so an idea that William had quite a while ago, actually. So William was saying, I have often wanted to figure out a way to use cards in D&D character creation, player character creation, to quickly deal out starting characters. And see, I am really close to that myself. In fact, when I think about running D&D online, I think about how do you abbreviate the process of rolling and picking race and picking class, and I think we all agree that picking equipment classically is one of the more time-consuming things. I've also thought about just having a big stack of player characters and say, you tell me what race and class you want. Here you go. Here's one of those completely statted out. Let's get started. Again, particularly for brand new players. And I am starting to think that you do need possibly at least 2 tracks of absolutely brand new player, just bam, here's the pre-made character. More advanced expert player, give them give them more bells and whistles and the ability to fine-tune their character. So I agree with William. I'm really close to doing that myself in my future games.
Awesome. Yeah, I can see that. I seem to remember that BJ used to do that, or did that a couple of times at HelgaCon, where he had like starting equipment cards that you could. Yes. Character generation, right? Yeah, I'm not imagining that, right?
Yeah, you're right. No, I remember that very well because BJ super creative. Usually, not as mathematically precise as I usually do stuff. So I usually would spot what was broken about it and just take a whole bunch of whatever was broken. Sorry, BJ. But I've done that more than once. And you know what? It's such a good referee, right? And then he would modify it on the fly, and he should. He's like, okay, no, the robots don't work like that anymore. We're gonna do something different here. Well, yeah, that's the proper response to me. Good job.
That's amazing. Before we run out of time, I got two other examples. One which you can see online, I'm realizing. If you go and watch the live stream of my birthday game, the first actual play that you and I ever live streamed.
Yes.
I used decks of cards for rumor tables. And if you remember, I had two of them. I had one that was just rumors that you could hear in the tavern. And so if you went to the tavern and spent a certain amount of money just buying people drinks and whatnot, you could draw a rumor card. And then the other one was, in that particular scenario, there was this known elemental cult, this evil elemental cult that was operating out of the forest nearby. And I had it that one of the cultists had been captured and was in the dungeons of the Baron. And if you bribed the guards, you could get in there and listen in on his interrogation. And so you could pay some money to bribe your way in to listen in on the interrogation and draw from the, I can't remember what I called it, something like ravings of the.
That's what I'm laughing right now. Actually, is
yeah. It was pretty funny, and of course, I think the players loved it. Right? My recollection is you guys like there was very eager to get through the entire deck of both of those decks, like because you could just you could see at a glance on the table how many were left. And you're like, I know there's some gems in there. I know there's some really good stuff. I wanna know all the things. Which is nice too, because you don't usually get that from a rumor table. You don't really get the how many of the rumors have we seen, right?
You're right. Actually, yeah.
And then, do you remember to write it down word for word as the DM's saying it? Is something nice to be able to hold it in your hand and look at it and be like, I have that note here in my hand permanently.
That's actually a really good point, because actually just the energy at the moment where the DM relates something, and then one of the players, and you need one or two of these players go, could you repeat that, please? And I'm going to write it down. Scribble, scribble, scribble. And then what was the next line? Scribble, scribble, scribble. And that's not a great energy beat at the table, honestly. I'm always glad to have that, but I myself am torn between getting it down carefully and delaying the play when there's just like one person transcribing it. So being able to just hand someone the mocked up letter or manuscript or rumor abbreviates that and keeps the game running.
Yeah. I will also say it offers an interesting role play opportunity, which I'm not sure existed, which is simply that I say my character goes to the tavern, spends some money listening to rumors. Great, I get to draw a card. I get to go back to the group and say, hey, I was just down at the tavern, and you'll never believe what this guy told me. Right? Instead of listening in to the DM spewing it out, now the player gets to do that, right? Which is kind of neat. Kind of like that.
Yep. There's a common. Here I am again now. There's a common improv exercise, or actually, I have seen this performed, whereby you get audience members to write some kind of. They've probably done this on Whose Line Is It Anyway? You get audience members to write like a short line or phrase or something like that. Stick it in the performer's pocket, and then halfway through a scene, you got to pull it out and you got to work it into the performance all of a sudden. And that's what that suddenly feels like a lot to me. And it's usually it comes out pretty well. That's a much better moment than the transcribe what the DM said bit. That's a really good point.
I like that a lot. I would use that technique again. I would make a rumor deck. Now that's a thing you got to make custom for each adventure you're running. But
but I feel like if you focus, like if there's a particular nugget that an NPC has to deliver, like delivering that in the manuscript form, all of a sudden that seems even stronger to me than it used to.
And here's a quick DIYer tip for folks listening in. Go out to your local Staples or whatever or office supply store and get yourself some printable business cards. Right, they come in big 8.5 by 11 sheets. They're perforated. You pop them out, and a lot of word processors, Word, whatever, have templates for these. that is a really nice way to quickly generate a custom deck of cards or something. I think that's what I did for those decks. Was I just got some custom business cards. It's a nice size. It's a little small. It's not quite your full poker card size, but it's at least they'll be uniform. You don't have to sit there with a pair of scissors and or an X-Acto knife and try to get this janky deck. That actually sits nice, and you can print it out. Not all handwritten.
Yeah. Good. I also started using labels in the last year or so. If I have pre-generated characters, I print a bunch of summary labels about their name and their class and who they are and what kinds of things they can do broadly, and then use that for place cards at the table. Just set it up in front of the player, and then me and the other players can see what they're about actually. And that worked really nicely with some pre-made labels on index cards for that.
Yeah, that's great.
I frequently, my whole life, I've walked into a stationery store and just thought about how can I use this for D&D, basically. These labels and these index cards and this accounting book, this accounting paper and this logarithmic, these logarithm graph paper, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely. Every time I walk into Staples, I'm like, I'm in the secondary RPG supply store. Absolutely. That is what that is.
Great.
Okay, we're about out of time, Dan. Any final thoughts on Fiasco, on the using cards instead of dice?
How does that go by? How does the hour go by so fast, Paul?
I don't know.
That is my question. That is my question. I warm up to it. It's not a complete silver bullet. In some ways, just making tables and dice are more flexible when you're in the early inventing stage. And then I got to admit, even if I have my biases, I see players working really liking cards, focusing their attention, making the game run faster. And if you can evolve your game to that point, the game really does flow better, honestly.
Viewers, I strongly recommend you check out the box set of Fiasco. You can buy this online or at various, probably at your local game store. Yes, you can find it on Amazon. I think that if you go to Bully Pulpit Games website, there's a page about where to buy it from. They have an online partner, I think, that they probably would prefer you to use. Check it out. Definitely recommend it. It's a great game. And it may be a nice way to introduce the concept of RPG to your non-RPG playing friends. I mean, we've discussed that before, and I won't introduce that whole new topic with 1 minute to go. Viewers, if you have any thoughts about other ways to incorporate this to your D&D game, what other things can we cardify? How else can we use custom decks of cards to improve our D&D game? Or just thoughts about the progression of RPGs from niche market to mainstream. Let us know. Drop some comments for us here in the comment section of the YouTube video. We'd love to hear from you, and maybe that'll spark some inspiration for future episodes.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe if you're new to the show, remember that you can like, follow, and subscribe to us, The Wandering DMs. We are on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and Facebook and GitHub and TikTok. And we do have the handle Wandering DMs on all those sites. And you know what? If you subscribe to us on YouTube today, you're going to be subscriber number 1,600. So nice round number that we always like. So if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, do it right now, and you'll be number 1,600, which we'll give you no prize for.
Oh, jeez. If you prefer to listen to our shows in audio-only podcast format, you can get those podcasts on our website at wanderingdms.com. Our full back catalog of shows is available there. Also, you can find us on various podcast carriers such as Google Podcasts and iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Pocket Cast. And I try to throw more names in here every time. I don't remember them all. Okay, there's a lot of them. If you are listening to the show right now on one of those websites, please take a moment, if possible, to rate and review us on that site. That helps other users of that site find our show, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really do. And of course, huge thanks to our patrons who support the Wandering DM show. If you would like to join them, please visit patreon.com/wanderingdms. And you'll see our different tiers, discounts on merch, access to a private Discord server, monthly behind the scenes stuff that we try to do. And best of all, our after party chat that we have every Sunday will be on Discord in about 10 minutes to continue the live conversation about Fiasco and evolving games from indie basics and moving from dice to other card-based randomizers and stuff like that. And we'll be both there today, right, Paul?
Absolutely. I will be there.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more to talk about. Actually, I have some more thoughts, frankly, on card-based elements to D&D. So I got some more to talk about, Dan.
Cool.
If you're viewing right now, throw $1 at the Patreon and come join us. It's a great value. We have a couple new patrons who just joined, and we hope we are going to see some of you in the Discord chat. It's fun. It's a lively chat, and we love to hear from you.
That'd be great. And in addition to that, look for our upcoming shows this week. I'll be back Thursday night, kind of late night, 11 p.m. Eastern time, as I repetitively get spanked at the AD&D Pool of Radiance game. So if you want to see me get violated over and over again by the rules of first edition D&D, apparently that's what happens Thursday nights now. But I'm among the great advice that I'm being given is don't try to fight your way through every single encounter, Dan, when your party is first level, like the 35 hobgoblins with a magic user, or the 25 kobolds that all have bows, or the 3 trolls and 2 ogres that crushed me last time. So maybe this Thursday I'm going to start using some role playing and try to talk to some people nicely and see where that leads me. Because my warlord attempt hasn't actually been doing super well. So totally new strategy for Dan on Thursday night. And Paul just brought up. I'm so glad Paul just brought up the birthday game that we ran a couple of years ago. We ran 24 hours of live D&D. Paul's birthday is right around the July 4th holiday, so we usually get together for that. And that particular one, we were running through the Dyson Logos adventure. Dyson's Delve, of course. Had a great time with it. You should totally watch that. So maybe we should do that again this year, Paul. Maybe we should get together for the upcoming 4th of July weekend, and we'll be gaming, and we'll play for 24 hours straight, and we'll stream the whole thing. That's we should do that, right? Is that what we're going to do this weekend?
Wow, I was about to say great idea until you got to the end there. I don't know if I'm up for another 24-hour marathon, but definitely let's get together, let's play some games, and let's put some of it on the internet for our wonderful viewers to watch. Let's do all those things.
Okay, I'm excited. All right, well, however much time it is, I'm excited by that, Paul. So that's probably what you're going to see next Sunday. Is Paul and I will actually be together. Possibly with some other friends, and doing some kind of gaming thing. I don't know. Maybe we'll play. Maybe we'll be playing Fiasco, possibly, or something else.
Yeah, we'll find some stuff for sure.
Yeah. Cool. So look for that next week, and hope you have a good 4th of July holiday coming up. Hope it's half as much fun as what we're going to do. And don't forget, we are live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, like next week. So please join us then for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.